Hello and welcome back to another video. Today on 9/11, on the 11th of September 2022, I will react to World War II Part 1 and Part 2 from OverSimplified. A great channel. I watched a lot of his videos and I like them all very much. The design is awesome. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Subscribe to my channel if you want to support me, if you want to help me out. If you have videos yourself you want me to react to, just write them into the comments. Otherwise, just enjoy. For this video, I have also again my Soviet shirt, so it fits to the content. We learned, of course, in school in Germany a lot of the World War. Second World War. The first also, but mostly about the second. In different parts of my school years, I have learned different things, so it comes again and again. Some complain about this. I think it's important. It's a very important topic. We are not guilty of anything what happened there at this time. I mean, people who live now, like me, which were born decades after the war. But we have a responsibility, I think. We have a responsibility to try our best to prevent such a thing from happening ever again anywhere in the world. At least that's how I see it, personally. I think we have a responsibility. If you think otherwise, just also write in the comments, stay politely. It's my opinion. And, yes. I have also maybe a tiny bit to say about. I mean, it was the most terrible war in human history, and right now we have also a war in Europe, even if it is not very comparable. But some people have there some weird takes about this war, which we have currently. But enough of this right now. I hope you will all enjoy the video. Subscribe to my channel, like the video, and we will start right now.
This video was made possible by Skillshare. Churchill was a man with many talents. He was an artist, a butterfly enthusiast, and he had an unpublished manuscript about aliens. Clearly, he was a man with an insatiable thirst for knowledge. Maybe he could have loaded up his computer and logged onto Skillshare, an online learning community with more than 19...
Use his link in his description for his on his video, if it is still active. I'm not sure. And support him through this.
1,000 classes in design, business, technology, and more. Perhaps he was considering a side career in fashion, but didn't know where to start. On Skillshare, he would find courses in fashion design and garment construction. Or if he wanted to learn app design, improve his photography, or just how to make a really good quesadilla, he would have found courses for all of these and more on Skillshare. Skillshare gives you access to high-quality classes taught by genuine experts.
I see advertisement for Skillshare all the time on all the different videos, and maybe that's because they are very awesome, or because they just need the advertisement. I'm not sure. I've never used Skillshare. Maybe I will one day. I have at least many recommendations for Skillshare, but yeah. So try it out if you want.
Working in their field. I work heavily with animation, and I was genuinely blown away by the number of really useful courses available to me, like this class full of tips and tricks for creating vector art, or this one for creating character walk cycles. For an annual subscription, Skillshare is under $10 a month. And if you'd like to try it out first, then I've got a deal just for Oversimplified viewers. The first 1,000 people to use this link, which can be...
And probably these 1,000 links are already long over, but still there are many videos, many YouTubers have such offers, so don't be sad also. I mean, you will get such offers very often.
Found in the description will get their first 2 months of Skillshare for just 99 cents. Be sure to try it out using the link in the description and learn something new today. Now, without further ado. It's 1902. A young man by the name of Benito Mussolini moves from Italy to Switzerland to avoid military service. He gets big into socialism, working for
And that's something when I watched the video for the first time which amazed me. That Mussolini was big into socialism. I have never thought about this, or that this might be the case. I mean, I always saw him just as a fascist. He was later, or he turned himself into, or he developed into. But I never thought that he was in his early life a socialist or into this idea. So interesting.
Trade unions, writing for socialist newspapers, advocating a violent overthrow of European monarchies, the whole shebang. This gets him in a bit of trouble with the Swiss police, so he gets arrested, sent back to Italy, set free, returns to Switzerland, is arrested again, goes back to Italy again, completes his military service after previously avoiding it, and then after a brief stint as an elementary school teacher, he finally returns to work as an avid socialist. His speeches and journal.
He didn't seem to be very happy as a teacher. And the designs are awesome. Very, very cute.
Journalistic abilities made him famous among Italian socialists. He was anti-war, so when Italy colonized Libya in 1910, he rioted and got arrested. Then World War I came along, and once again he protested Italy's involvement. But then he thought,
I mean, this seems very, very like a person I would like so far, against war and into socialism. So this seems very good. And now I think it's a point of time where he developed into, or he got a bit stranger.
Wait a minute, this war could bring about the social climate needed to overthrow European monarchies and bring about the socialist revolution everywhere. And suddenly he was pro-war, but his fellow socialists didn't like his new pro-war stance, so they kicked him out of the party. So then he said, you know what, I'm done with socialism. We need something.
I knew it. I mean, I watched the video before, but yeah. This new idea is fascism, and it's not good.
New, not based on class divisions tearing us apart, but based on unity through nationality. We'll conquer the Mediterranean and reunite all Italian peoples just like the days of the Roman Empire. I'll call it fascismo, and it will guide the Italian nation to greatness. That's all we'll...
I don't think so. Fascism is not good. It combines all of the bad things of humanity and puts it into one ideology. So that's definitely not good.
Well and good, Mr. Mussolini, but what kind of haircut am I giving you? Let's go with... bold.
Bold. Fascism and bold. I mean, nothing against bold, but fascism is definitely not good.
Italy had been on the winner's side in World War I, and they hoped they were going to get a lot out of it, but in the end, they only got a little, and they felt cheated. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that the Italian people were a little unhappy. So when Mussolini came along and said that he could fix everything, his fascist movement gained a lot of support. In 1922, he went to the king and said, "Make me prime minister, or I'll make me prime minister." And the king said, "You and what army?" "This army."
Okay. That's the king then.
Fair enough. Then he went to...
Okay, fair enough, but yeah, the expression was probably similar,
about establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had its first fascist dictator. Next up, Germany. Germany had been on the loser's side, and they got absolutely wrecked by the Treaty of Versailles. They lost territory, had to demilitarize the Rhineland, had to reduce their army to just 100,000 men, couldn't have an air force, had to pay the Allies a huge amount of money that it didn't have, and
how much was this? 800 billion?
100,000 men, couldn't have an air force, had to pay the Allies a huge amount of money that it...
I didn't want to make it full screen.
Didn't have.
Okay, 800 million or billion, I think it is quite a lot.
And a new rule was established that every Englishman withheld the right to walk into the center of Berlin, pick out any German they wanted, and spank the hell out of them. I made that last one up, but it helps you understand how all of this felt to Germans. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that when a small angry man with a silly mustache came along and said that he could fix everything, the German people loved it. Hitler had been a soldier during World War I, and he was crazy patriotic, and nobody was madder than him.
Nationalism is not good. Let's just say it this way. Let's just keep it this way. Nationalism is not good.
about Germany's humiliation. He helped start a new political party, and in 1923 attempted a march on Munich with his boys. And then he got arrested. But his popularity grew, and in 1933, the president made him chancellor. He believed he was Germany's great destined savior, and he went full megalomaniac, establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center.
Yeah. The way Hitler got to power is really interesting. I mean, some think he just kind of overthrew the government, but he was kind of voted in. I mean, not just from Paul from Hindenburg, who was the president at this time. From him, he was made the Kanzler, or Reichskanzler, as it was called at the time. But the parliament themselves voted for a certain law, which is, I don't know the English name, but was 1934. In March, I think, but I'm not exactly sure about month. But in this law, they kind of agreed to have no powers anymore. They agreed to limit the or take away all of the freedoms, the kind of in a democracy, like freedom to protest, freedom to of the press, and so they agreed. All of the parties agreed to accept this, except the Social Democratic Party, SPD, current SPD. They voted against this, and yeah, they were the only one. Even the party, the CDU, the current conservative Christian Democratic Union, was born out of two other parties. I don't know those names, but both of these parties at the time, 1934, agreed also to this law. So, yeah, this was a different SPD, by the way, but nothing with the current SPD could compare to, but it is very interesting. The speech from the SPD, from the chief of the SPD at the time, is also on YouTube available. Maybe I will also react to this, or at least, I mean, I don't know if I remember the name right now, but I will maybe put a link to the video into the description so you can also listen to it. It's very interesting. History is interesting.
Europe had fascist dictator number 2. Hitler and Mussolini had a lot of the same ideas, but more important.
Moment, I want to look.
Europe had fascist dictator number 2. Hitler and Mussolini had a lot of the same ideas.
So, radical nationalism, totalism, violence, and militarism, anti-democratic, anti-socialist, and extremely racist and quite racist. Okay, so the only difference from them was that the Italian fascism is not so racist as nation socialism from Hitler. So, I don't know much about Mussolini, so I kind of just believe what he's telling us here in the moment, but it's interesting.
Ideas, but more importantly, they had the same enemies, and they started to get along. Anyone else want to be friends? Franco? No? You good? I do. Who's that? It's Japan, and they've taken over northern China. Let's rewind a bit. Japan had isolated itself from the rest of the world for over 200 years until the Americans showed up and said, you're going to trade with us and you're going to like it. Then the Western powers imposed a bunch of unequal treaties, meaning Japan's economy was bust. They also had no natural resources, so they just...
I think I heard about this problem in a different video, maybe from Real Life Law, I'm not sure, but that they also, like kind of China, get most of the oil and other resources too, but in the video I watched, it was oil. He was telling about from the Middle East, so they import much of their oil needs and gas maybe also from, I think, this Persian Gulf, similar to China. So I think it was in the video from Real Life Law about how they are arguing about one of those islands. I don't know which islands, but maybe those islands here in the next to Taiwan here on the bottom. I don't know if you see my cursor, but let's continue.
Decided to go get some. They went to war with China to gain a sphere of influence over Korea, and they took a bunch of China's stuff. But then the West said, hey, cut that out. And since Japan couldn't take on the West, they said, okay, I guess we'll just go home. Wait a minute, what are you doing? Taking advantage of a weakened China and setting up spheres of influence. But I was the one who weakened them. We know. And you guys didn't let me have anything. We know. That seems unfair. We don't think so. Okay, see ya. So Japan thought, screw this, and went to war with Russia, and stunned everyone by actually winning. Then they fully annexed Korea, but they didn't stop there. In World War I, they took Germany's colonies and islands in Asia, and then in an incident that was maybe staged by the Japanese army, a bomb...
Probably. Okay, so it is very sure that they made this up. I'm not...
blew up a Japanese train in Manchuria, giving them an excuse to launch an invasion and take over. So here's the situation.
Here, at the Republic of China, which we now know as Taiwan, the same flag a moment ago was in the video here
in
also.
Manchuria, giving them an excuse to launch an invasion.
Yeah, it was at this time the Republic of China, and everything was Republic of China. The People's Republic of China, the current China as we know it, came later.
And take over. So here's the situation. Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Japan all believe they're racially superior, all feel hostility towards the Allies, and all want to militarize and take over more stuff. And so they did. Let's start with Germany. Hitler hated the Treaty of Versailles, and now he was ready to begin undoing it. In complete violation of the treaty, the first Luftwaffe squadrons were set up, conscription was introduced, and he pimped up his army. The Allies did nothing. Then Hitler sent his army back into the demilitarized Rhineland, giving orders to immediately retreat if the Allies showed up. The Allies did nothing. With his military re-strengthened, he could now move on to step 2. He wanted to rapidly increase the Aryan population, and to do so, he needed Lebensraum, or in other words, he would have to take over the world. But for now, a good portion...
well, I mean, his intentions, I mean, take over the whole world, very ambitious. Of course, stupid and terrible. But, yeah, luckily he was not successful with much of it. Just Europe fell under his control and a big chunk of Russia. Many millions died. We talked about this, or I didn't learn, I knew it before, but in the video from me myself, where I react to the fall of World War II, I talked about this.
Of Europe would do, and he began eyeing up his neighbors. The Allies finally started to get worried, so they implemented a fairly useless diplomatic strategy called appeasement, and it went a little...
and now, I mean, I like OverSimplified. Many of his videos are good, but now I think, I mean, how he talks about appeasement. Appeasement is important. It is, as he talk about this, it seems to be a little bit like appeasement was the wrong thing to do at this moment, and it is at least it sounds a bit like appeasement is not good, but in the situation where Chamberlain was Prime Minister of Great Britain, and Chamberlain tried this appeasement policy, it was good and it was right, in my opinion. It was 100% right and the best thing to do. The best thing to do, and also the wish of Chamberlain, probably. I'm not Chamberlain, but as I see it right now in the current time, was to try to prevent a big war. And to try to avoid war is good. So if you even have to sacrifice something, give up some I don't know, land ideas, things you were sure about which cannot be done before, then but if this could prevent a war by doing this, it is right to do this. It is the correct policy. It is, I don't know, it's just it feels right to try everything to avoid a war. And some may not agree with me when I say this, but right now it is the same. In the conflict we experience here right now in Europe today, since the beginning of the year in Ukraine, we have to try, and that's what all of the countries should do. European countries and other countries, to try to appease, not I mean appeasement, peace policy, not war policy. I don't want to lean myself too far out of the window, but everything which would increase the likelihood of peace right now in Ukraine, and earlier at Chamberlain's time in Germany or in Europe. It's right to do. It's correct to do. It is necessary, and it is it is good to do. And everyone who does not want this, does not want peace, and thinks a war meant, which would then be the opposite, is better. Does not make the situation in the slightest bit better. War is not good for anyone. And anything which prevents this war is good. That's all I will say. I don't want that this video gets age restricted, and sometimes if you talk too much about this current war, you get age restricted, and also I don't want this. But so I will not say much more, but war is terrible, and everyone and everything which helps to prevent this war is good. Now we continue with the video.
Little something like this. Hitler would say, I want that thing. And the Allies would say, you can't have that thing. Okay, you can have that thing, but no more. I want that thing. And repeat. In 1938, Hitler's army marched into Austria and just took it, with no resistance. Boom, this is Germany now. Next, he demanded to be given the Sudetenland, an area of Czechoslovakia with many ethnic Germans. The Allies held a meeting with Hitler in Munich and said, look, we're going to give you what... Hang on, this meeting is about my territory. Shouldn't I come to the meeting too? Anyway, we're going to give you what you want. Really? Yeah. Just like that? Yep. What's the catch? Just sign this piece of paper promising you won't invade the rest of Czechoslovakia. Okay. Then Chamberlain returned home victorious, waving...
I mean, that's what I meant. It seems like he... I don't know if I don't want to say that Oversimplified wants to make fun about Chamberlain. Maybe he wants, but I don't want to... I don't know it, so I will not say that he wants this. It just feels a little bit wrong. And as I said, peace over everything else. And Chamberlain, in my opinion, tried his best to prevent a big war, and it failed. Yes, it failed, but he tried his best. And it's nothing anyone should judge him in a bad way later on now, because he tried his best, and we should also try our best. I mean, everyone and every single one of us should try his or her best. And our politicians should try their best to prevent big wars. And small wars. All kind of wars.
A signed piece of paper in the air, declaring crisis to be averted and the continuation of world peace, and we built a statue of Chamberlain in his honor, and every day on the 30th of September we celebrate Chamberlain Day. Hitler's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. What? He's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. Oh. You lied to me. What do you expect? I'm Hitler. Not to be outdone, Mussolini also wanted to get in on the action. He thought to himself, isn't there a not yet colonized nation somewhere which is so underdeveloped that the people would be defending themselves against our tanks with literal bows and arrows and wooden spears? Oh, there is? Fantastic. And so he took it. Italy also wanted to control the entrance to the Adriatic Sea, so they occupied Albania. Then, in another incident which was maybe staged by the Japanese, gunfire was exchanged by Japanese and Chinese troops at the market.
This time the probability was smaller, so maybe it is not so much sure if it was also staged.
Marco Polo Bridge, and the Japanese launched yet another invasion against China. They swept through Beijing and Shanghai, and then advanced through the Yangtze Valley to China's then capital, Nanking. It was here that saw the worst of Japan's shocking atrocities committed against the Chinese people. Back in Europe, Germany and Italy made their relationship status official by signing the Pact of Steel. Then, Hitler turned his eyes towards Poland and the hated Polish corridor splitting Germany in two. At this point, the Allies really had to put their foot down, and they warned him that an invasion of Poland would mean war. Hitler had planned to continue his advance eastward, but he didn't want to end up fighting a war on two fronts.
And so he made this pact with Stalin, not aggression pact.
So for now he made an alliance with Stalin, saying, how about we both invade Poland and split it between the two of us, and I definitely won't not refrain from not betraying you sometime in the future. Sounds good. This new alliance stunned the West.
But the design is really awesome, and I don't want to criticize Oversimplified. I don't know what his intentions have been, and yeah, it's just my opinion.
On the 1st of September 1939, German troops entered Poland, and Britain and France declared war on Germany. The Poles fought hard, but they were no match for the two giants crashing down on them from either side. Then came a period known as the Phony War, where everyone just sort of sat around not doing much. The French had launched a small invasion into the Saarland, but they maintained mostly defensive positions, and after a while decided to just turn around and call it a day. Speaking of France, the French were still super proud of their victory in World War I, and they hadn't really moved on from it. They still used horses, they dispatched messages by motorbike instead of using radio, orders from the commander-in-chief were usually pretty vague, and the troops were rarely inspected. They built a line of defenses along their German border, but didn't bother extending it all the way to the Channel, and they wouldn't launch artillery strikes against Germany out of fear of being retaliated against. In a war, they didn't want to attack the enemy. And at first the UK wasn't much better. Chamberlain still naively hoped that the war could be ended diplomatically. Instead of bombing raids, the RAF dropped propaganda leaflets over German cities, which one air marshal said likely did nothing but provide the continent with toilet paper for the duration of the war. They also only sent 200,000 men to France, while the French had mobilized millions. Both Britain and France wanted to avoid a repeat of the First World War, and so they wanted to keep the war as far from home as possible. So they turned their eyes north, towards Norway. Neutral Sweden was exporting iron ore to Germany through neutral Norway, so the Allies asked them if they could please stop exporting iron ore to Germany, but this request was refused. Then the Soviet Union attacked Finland, so the Allies said, how about we land troops in Norway?
Yes, Finnish Soviet War, Winter War, I think it is called.
And move them across Sweden to go help out your good pal Finland, and along the way maybe take control of all your arm fields. But Norway and Sweden still said no. So the UK mined the waters around Norway to force any transport ships into international waters, and they also attacked a German tanker they found in the area. Hitler realized what the Allies were up to, and he quickly moved to secure his supply of iron ore. He launched an invasion through Denmark into Norway. The Allies rushed to land troops at key ports along the coast, but Germany had taken control of Norway's airfield, and their air superiority decided the fight. The Allies had to retreat. After this slightly embarrassing failure, Chamberlain resigned and was replaced with Winston Churchill, who had a slightly...
Winston Churchill, an impressive man. I watched documentation on what was it called? Not Curiosity Stream, Nebula, and they also make always advertisement for Curiosity Stream and Nebula, a bundle deal for less than $15 a year or so, something like this. I have it myself, but go to one of those videos. You mostly find at some of them also offered for this kind of deal. But I watched the documentation about Churchill, and it was very impressive. He was a war man, so I mean, I can't really like him, but it was impressive the way he did his job, and this victory sign, kind of, Great Britain will never give up a victory or so.
Different approach to dealing with the Germans. Hitler's overall strategy was similar to Germany's First World War strategy. Attack France, defeat France, knocking out the UK in the process, then turn on the Soviet Union and win the war. During the Phony War, the Allies had given Hitler time to prepare his...
It sounds much more simple than it probably was, and I mean, it failed. Yeah, it failed, that's good.
Forces. Now, he was ready to...
But if the war never had broken out, which of course would be best, no one would have died.
Attack. The Allies had wanted to place troops in Belgium, but Belgium had refused, and in a move that surprised pretty much no one, Hitler launched an invasion to get around France's defenses. The Allies charged into Belgium at full speed to meet the German invasion head-on, and it looked like a repeat of the First World War was coming. But this time, Hitler had a trick up his sleeve. Blitzkrieg. As the Germans advanced, they sent thousands of refugees westward, slowing down the Allies. Then, to the south, the French had left the Ardennes, an area full of hills and forests, pretty underdefended, because they thought it was naturally impenetrable. Well, the Germans were about to penetrate it with everything they had. They smashed 50 Wehrmacht divisions through and encircled the Allied armies at lightning speed. The best of the Allied forces were now trapped. The Germans squeezed in from all sides, taking out France's best armies and nearly wiping out the British too, but they managed to make a desperate last-minute escape at Dunkirk, with British civilian ships even making the perilous journey to bring their young men home. With most of the French forces depleted, the Germans breezed through, taking Paris, and France fell. What the Germans couldn't do in World War I, Hitler had done just like that. Hitler hoped that with the fall of France, the UK would also lose hope and sue for peace. But quite annoyingly, it didn't, and he needed to secure the Western Front.
Yeah, the only European country which never gave up. I mean, Spain was neutral and also fascist in its own way, but Great Britain never gave up. Switzerland technically also was never invaded. It was never invaded, but yeah, it was in the middle and it was kind of difficult, of course. But Great Britain never gave up.
So he tried to force them into submission with mind games. The UK were now all alone, and Hitler wanted to emphasize that. First of all, just before France fell, Italy finally declared war on the Allies, making the UK's situation even worse. Next, instead of just occupying all of France, Hitler occupied the coastal areas for defense, but allowed France to continue its existence as a German puppet state. This way, it looked like the UK's old ally had decided to switch sides. Hitler also hoped that the UK wouldn't attack any of her old allies' navy bases or...
When you look at this at this point, it gets much more weird for a current map. I mean, all of these parts being France, all of these parts being British. I mean, after World War II, the decolonization period began. So yeah, it looks weird on the map, but yeah.
Colonies in Africa, giving Hitler an extra line of defense to the south. But the UK made sure to respond to this by sailing down to France's navy base in Algeria and wrecking a bunch of ships. So have at it. Hitler then began laying down plans for an invasion of Great Britain. Before German troops could land on British soil, he would first need air and naval superiority across the Channel. Waves of German bombers came, while the completely outnumbered RAF worked bravely around the clock in an attempt to quell the German attacks. At first, the Luftwaffe targeted British ports and coastal facilities. Then it attacked RAF bases, crippling the RAF's ability to defend the nation. And it looked like Hitler's Great British invasion was coming. But then, Churchill ordered a small, pretty insignificant bombing raid over Berlin. It didn't do much damage, but Hitler was furious, and he immediately ordered the Luftwaffe to refocus its attacks on civilian targets in London. Children were sent off to the countryside away from their parents to avoid danger, and frequent trips to air raid shelters became a daily occurrence. But British morale held firm. Smiling, knitting, lounging casually, these people have balls of steel. This refocusing on London also gave the RAF breathing space to reorganize, so Hitler kind of shot himself in the foot there. Just the foot for now. Finally, the Luftwaffe sent one massive all-out attack on London, and the RAF successfully repelled it, destroying many of the German aircraft and placing air superiority firmly in British hands. Hitler's invasion had to be postponed, but the bombing of British cities continued for some time. Yeah, I will, should I react to the second part just in the same video? Think about this. It will be definitely a very long video, but hey, why not? I mean, I had never a video which was longer than, I think, 45 minutes. I think it was something, 45 minutes was a Geography Now Russia video. The reaction to it, and maybe now it's time for a longer video. So, yeah, we will do it. Second part of World War II, by OverSimplified. Please check out his channel and subscribe for him and like his video, and I also like it right now, and also like my video if you think it's good. If you have anything where you don't agree with me, it's always completely okay. Just stay politely, write into the comments what you think, and we can argue in the comments. But yeah, like the video and subscribe for both of us. Let's start with the second part. This video was made possible by Skillshare, an online learning community. Stick around until the end of the video to learn how you can get an exclusive deal just for OverSimplified viewers. So what else?
Yeah, do this and go to this video. Maybe a more current video about the Punic Wars. Maybe the links are still active. They're probably also already used up. But yeah, when he makes videos, go and check them out. Activate the bell so you don't miss out a video, and can maybe use one of the links he will use in his future videos. So yeah, do this and subscribe for him, and for me too if you want. I say it too often, but yeah, I need more subscribers. So let's continue.
This is happening. Well, when I said Britain was all alone, that wasn't entirely true. Many Commonwealth nations and other allied colonies had joined.
So this looks, of course, very different than right now. I don't know why the US flag is here. Did the US took over Canada? I'm not sure. But here, Australia, New Zealand, India, Indonesia, most of a big chunk of Africa, Oman, Yemen, UAE, and so many countries. Also, even in South America, a few. So this looks much more different. But it's interesting. I mean, before the decolonization began. So let's continue.
The war and Britain's support. They would play a key role throughout the war, particularly in the African and Italian campaigns.
Yeah, I'm here. A moment.
And Britain's support. They would play a key role.
Yeah, you see here. Oops, sorry, Canada. Yeah. I was already a bit confused, but yeah.
Throughout the war, particularly in the African and Italian campaigns. On the Axis side, Germany, Italy, and Japan signed the defensive Tripartite Pact, bringing their military alliance even closer together. The Soviet Union's war against Finland should have been an easy victory, but it became a humiliating struggle, and their military ineptitude was put on full display. In the end, they did force the Finns to sue for peace. Then, they continued their honorable campaign of pushing around much smaller countries by
But still, the Soviet Union, as you have seen, maybe got a bit more territory through the war with Finland.
annexing the Baltic states and part of northern Romania. France's colonies in equatorial Africa were like, heck no, we aren't going to join the Germans, and they all pledged their allegiance to free France, except for Gabon, which had to be taken by military force. The Allies also tried to capture the strategic port of Dakar, but that ended in failure. Mussolini had seen Hitler's successes, and he thought now it was Italy's time to shine, so he tried to take British Somaliland, and that went pretty well. Then he tried to take Egypt, and that went less well. Then he tried to take Greece, and that went really badly. Churchill began referring to Italy as Europe's soft underbelly.
That's Churchill. I mean, it's in the documentation also. It was kind of like that Churchill made always good jokes about his opponents. You have to sit yourself, and probably there are collections or something like this over nice jokes from Churchill. I would think so.
He began favoring a military campaign from the south and started sending British troops to Greece. All of this had Hitler pretty concerned, and he moved to protect his southern flank. He had been getting friendly with Hungary and twisted their arm into signing the Tripartite Pact and joining the Axis powers. Romania was also eager to join for protection against the Soviet Union. The Tripartite Pact was designed to prevent any other countries from deciding to join the Allies, specifically Britain's old ally, the pesky United States of America. When war first broke out, American public opinion was strongly against joining.
That is something strange. I mean, at least for current times, you would not think that Americans are very pacifists. But it was a different time, and they had just fought the First World War, so maybe it is understandable.
In 1940, there was an election. The Republican candidate said, "I will not send any young Americans to die in Europe." And sitting President Franklin D. Roosevelt said, "I will also not send any young Americans to die in Europe. Unless I have to, then I might." And Roosevelt won. Churchill asked him to join the war, but Roosevelt said, "No can do, Winston, but you know what? Here, have some weapons."
I have also seen, I don't know where I have seen, maybe on Curiosity Stream or also Nebula, or YouTube, maybe even videos about how America, the United States of America to be precisely, delivered so many weapons to Great Britain and to the Soviet Union also, from about the North Route to the port city of I don't know the name. It's something with N. I forgot. Near the Finnish border. So one of the only ice-free harbors of Russia, or the Soviet Union at this time. But they sent so many weapons, millions of tons of weapons to Russia, and through this weapons, the Soviet Union was also able to defeat Germany, I think.
America began supplying the Allies with food and munitions, but there was one problem. German U-boats were sinking thousands of Allied supply ships.
I pause maybe too often, but there are so many things I have to say. Also, the movie Enigma is, I think, about this U-boat submarine fight between cargo ships and German submarines in the Atlantic Ocean. Very interesting and very good. I mean, the movie is good.
In the Atlantic, including American ones. If the Germans could sever Britain's supply line, the UK would starve. Throughout the war, the Allies had to come up with better technology to fight the U-boats. Improved radar, aircraft with longer range, better weaponry and convoy tactics. At one point, a man even called a meeting and said, "Pykrete. You take some wood, you take some ice, you put them together, you get pykrete." And then he pulled out a gun and shot some wood and it shattered. And then he shot some pykrete and the bullet ricocheted off it and hit someone else in the conference room. Then they tried to make a pykrete aircraft carrier, but that idea was scrapped because that's a really dumb idea. In the end, Alan Turing and his team of
Alan Turing was the guy who cracked the Enigma code from the German submarines, and yeah.
Codebreakers cracked Germany's Enigma code, and the U-boats gradually became less and less of a threat. Back in Africa, Britain decided to push Italy out of Egypt. Hey, that was pretty easy, so they kept going. Hitler realized he was going to have to finally step in and do something. He went to Bulgaria and Yugoslavia and said, "Hey, I'm going to move troops through you to get to Greece, so either join us or, be invaded. Bulgaria opted to join them. Yugoslavia opted to be invaded. Then Greece finally fell to the joint German-Italian invasion. The British had moved troops from North Africa to fight in Greece, which helped Rommel and his tank divisions push the British back to Egypt, and they could have kept going, but a small, mostly Australian force held out under siege for 8 months in Tobruk, denying the Germans a strategic port city and disrupting their supply line. Despite having some success in the Middle East, the British didn't seem like any real threat for now. Hey, Soviet Union, look out.
The biggest mistake in, I think, the war was to attack the Soviet Union. Because, as you know from also the video about the falling of World War II and Stalingrad, today Volgograd, it was a pretty big mistake.
3 million troops, Hitler launched the largest ground invasion in history, and Stalin was far from ready. Both Churchill and Roosevelt had warned him of an impending attack, but he dug his head in the sand and the Soviets didn't stand a chance. Germany made staggering progress, with huge encircling movements capturing mind-boggling numbers of Russian troops. 250,000 at Bialystok, Minsk, 300,000 at Smolensk, nearly 700,000 at Kiev, and again at Vyazma and Bryansk. Leningrad was put under a siege that would last an insufferable 4 years. The invasion of Russia had been Hitler's main ideological goal from the beginning, and his hatred for the ethnic peoples there was now unleashed in all its fury. The Eastern Front of
Yes, in the video about the fall of World War II, we already heard about the massive murders and dying and killings and this German army did to the Soviet people. It was terrible. Millions of people died. That's also, why war is terrible, and we have to do everything to prevent this, because such things should not happen ever again.
the Second World War was brutal.
My girlfriend just wrote to me, so I had to write with her for a moment. Here I am back again, and we continue with the video. I don't know what I said in the moment, so yeah, was terrible, and what the Germans or the Nazis did in the Soviet Union was absolutely terrible. And when I have the chance one day to go to this, I don't know if it is it's not a shrine. It's some kind of memory place in Volgograd. When I have it's a chance to go there one day, I will definitely it will be definitely mind blowing, similar experience like visiting a concentration camp. Just so much history, and then you feel so embarrassed about the things your own country did. I mean, if you are German, you maybe know what I mean. Some other countries, of course, also have terrible past, so other countries also maybe understand what I mean. But yeah, let's continue with the video.
Brutal for all that endured it. The Germans were now inside of Moscow, and that's it. It's all over. But then it happened. It got cold. Stupid cold. Hitler had.
Why has Hitler a calendar with a cat? Cats are cute. Hitler is terrible. Anyway, yeah, it got cold. The Russian winter, the Napoleon, between Russia and Napoleon, the war also ended or was changed in the winter. So Russia and winter, they get along. Invaders from Russia and winter, it doesn't. It's not that good of a relationship between invaders which want to invade Russia and the winter of Russia.
Had hoped the Soviets would give up before winter, but they kept fighting. His commanders came to him and said, "Can we please dig in for the winter and wait until spring?" "No, keep going. But oil is literally freezing inside our vehicles." "That's fine, keep going. We're having to leave the corpses of our frozen horses by the side of the road so we can still find our way in the snowdrift." "Perfectly normal, keep going." Hitler hadn't given his millions of men winter clothing and supplies because he thought he really should have won by now. Then, Stalin called in troops from the Siberian front, specially trained to fight in the extreme cold, and the Germans were no match. They were now being pushed back. They had no choice but to dig in and wait for winter to end. Germany's victories were staggering, and Japan was eager not to miss the victory bus. Their war in China had come to a standstill, but they wanted to keep expanding their sphere of influence and getting those sweet, sweet raw materials. They began making plans to expand southward, but there was a problem. Southeast Asia was heavily colonized by America and Great Britain. It was also full of ocean. Ocean meant naval combat, and there was no way the Japanese Navy could stand up to the US and the UK. So they thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could destroy their navies before we begin our conquest? And so it was. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese launched a surprise air raid on the US Pacific.
For a longer period of time, but I mean, Pearl Harbor was always a term I knew. So also learned at school and so, but I haven't now since one of the videos, and it's not this video maybe, but since one of those videos I watched that it was in Hawaii. Anyway, it doesn't matter so much, but it just something more I wanted to say.
Fleet at Pearl Harbor and inflicted a huge amount of damage. They also attacked British colonies in Southeast Asia. Roosevelt had no choice but to declare war on Japan, and so did Churchill. Hitler then declared war on America, even though he totally didn't have to. The attack on Pearl Harbor seemed like a big Japanese victory, but they didn't attack any of the naval repair yards, fuel storage tanks, or the submarine base, meaning the Pacific Fleet would be up and running again pretty soon. In the meantime, though, the Japanese were able to begin their conquest. They took Guam, the Gilbert Islands, Wake Island, Hong Kong, and the Philippines. They forced Thailand to join them so they could march their troops through to Malaya. They swept through Singapore, North Borneo, the East Indies, New Guinea, the Solomons, and they were now threatening northern Australia and the borders of India. Japan's victory had been as staggering as the
very great extension for I mean, yeah, they got quite a lot, and they were also very terrible to the people. I mean, the Japanese army very brutal war crimes they also committed. I don't know so much about this part of the Second World War, but if you do know more about this and want to share something with me, please write into the comments videos about I could watch about this part of the Second World War. I don't know much about it.
Germans, and reinforced the Japanese idea that this was a divine war which they were destined to win. But their victories had been based on speed, not power, and power would eventually catch up with them. For now, though, in all
it's very cynic, you know. I mean, it makes sense, and it is probably also
power,
right.
And power.
Yeah, this Manhattan Project, atomic bomb, and Manhattan Project was a project of the scientists which developed the atomic bomb, and yeah, like power came. Power would catch up to them, which have literally happened with the nuclear bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Would eventually catch up with them. For now, though, in all occupied nations, the people suffered. Persecution, forced labor, harsh punishments for any who spoke out against their occupiers. In Europe, the Nazis were rounding up ethnic minorities and other unwanted groups and individuals. In particular, millions of Jewish people would suffer through the terrible events of the Holocaust. Brave resistance movements rose up in defiance of their invaders, while the people held out for hope. And hope was coming. Winter was over, and Hitler could continue his push eastward. But this time, he switched up his strategy. He wanted to focus on the south. His plan was to cut off the Russian armies in the Caucasus, an area full of oil.
In a moment ago, in one of the pictures, and now in both of them, the Crimean Peninsula was already blue, and now it is red again.
And then invade the Caucasus and take all the oil. His forces moved across the north with ease, and Hitler got cocky. He rerouted the 4th Panzer Army south early, leaving the 6th Army to complete the encirclement.
Oh yeah, the 6th Army. The 6th Army which took Stalingrad, what means took, they fought in Stalingrad and completely surrendered. I think in 42, I'm not exactly sure about the year, but they surrendered later.
Movement alone. To do so, the 6th Army had to reach and take the key Soviet city of Stalingrad. The Russians defended it fiercely, and Stalingrad saw some of the harshest fighting of the entire war. The Soviets held up the German advance for 5 months as they battled in the war-torn city, which bought them valuable time. When the Germans had first launched their invasion a year earlier, the Soviets had moved their factories to the east. Those factories had been building a butt-ton of tanks and aircraft and getting the Soviet army up to scratch. Now, it was ready. Stalin gathered his new and improved forces around the city, and in an attack that resembled Hitler's own encirclement.
Volgograd, how the city is called now. I want to visit the city. Definitely. I also thought about moving there at some point. Maybe. I have many plans or many ideas. So nothing is. Everything is just ideas so far. But I definitely want to go there and visit the city. Visit the city once.
tactics, they began surrounding the Sixth Army. Hitler's commanders came to him and said, "Hey, maybe we should retreat." But Hitler said, "No, you stay."
This animation when he always shoots himself in the in the mirror, and then yeah, he kind of made a lot of mistakes, but it's good that he made these mistakes, of course. No one wants to live under such a country, and those who want are idiots or stupid, or both. But anyway, let's continue.
The entire Sixth Army was trapped and had to surrender. With complete air superiority, the Soviets started pushing westward. For Stalin, it was a resounding victory. For Hitler, an absolute catastrophe. Things also weren't looking too good for Hitler elsewhere. With America now in the war, Allied bombing over German cities reached devastating...
Yeah, Switzerland was neutral in this war, which is amazing. I think that they got stayed neutral the whole time. Impressive. One of the reasons why I mean, Switzerland would also be a nice country to live in, I think. This policy of staying neutral, I like very much.
Levels. In Africa, the British had pushed Rommel back again. Then they were pushed back again, and finally, after a decisive battle at El Alamein, and with American and British troops arriving in the west, the Germans and Italians were squeezed out of Africa. Japan was also already seeing its rapid success being turned around. They attempted to take the island of Midway, but the US Navy was ready for the attack, and they sank Japan's carrier. Actually, they sank a lot of them. It was a battle from which the Japanese Navy would never recover. British, Indian, and Chinese troops held the line in the harsh jungle terrain of Burma, and the Japanese suffered losses in the...
There's so many different places where war took place. I mean, not just in Belgium and France, not in the Soviet Union only, but also in the jungles of Burma or Myanmar, or how it is called now, Indonesia, in Africa, in the deserts of the Sahara. So many places where you not normally think that the Second World War took a lot of people's life, but it did.
Solomon Islands and New Guinea. They began to realize they were not invincible. With the Axis out of Africa, the Allies had to decide their next move. Churchill still wanted to attack from the south, while the Americans preferred a full sea invasion in northern France. "All right," said the Americans, "we'll do it your way." Allied forces successfully landed in Sicily and began moving north. They also carried out bombing raids over Rome. The thing was, many of the people in Sicily had relatives living in America, and they greeted the American troops quite warmly. With the war reaching home territory, most Italians just weren't that into it, and Mussolini was suddenly very unpopular. He was voted out by his own fascist Grand Council and was toppled from power. Italy immediately began negotiations for surrender. Hitler wasn't surprised and had already sent reinforcements southward. In an operation he ironically called Operation Axis, German troops quickly disarmed Italian troops in the north. The Allies continued fighting the Germans...
What Axis at this point?
Up through Italy, but then winter set in, meaning mud, and everything slowed to a halt. "All right," said the Americans, "let's do it our way as well." Germany had made itself a lot of enemies, and millions of Allied troops had been gathering...
It doesn't look very good. The Western Allies. Yeah.
In England, as factories worked around the clock producing the war material needed for a super crazy massive the likes of which the world has never seen before invasion of Europe. The Germans knew an Allied invasion would come, but they didn't know where it would land. Thanks to Allied deception tactics, they thought there was a pretty good chance it would come at Calais, but the Allies were really going to land in Normandy because it was less fortified and the beaches were nicer. Under the careful planning of General...
It's also a movie, The Last Day, I don't know exactly the name, but the D-Day? D-Day, I'm not sure about how the movie was called, but it was also a nice movie. It was more a war heroizing movie, but it was a okay movie at least.
Dwight D. Eisenhower, the invasion that had been long in the making was just about ready to go. Just one thing was preventing the launch: the British weather. For a short while, everyone sat around waiting for a decent day, and then it came. On the night of June 5th, over 1,000 bombers took off and raided coastline defenses, while paratroopers were dropped inland in a bit of a chaotic operation, tasked with sabotaging defenses and capturing key bridges to stop any German reinforcements from reaching the beaches. Early the next morning, the barrage came, as Allied ships fired a huge number of shells at the German fortifications, and then the landings. The Americans at Utah and Omaha, the British at Golden Sword, and the Canadians at Juneau. It was a tremendous struggle with a great loss of life, particularly at Omaha, but the Allied troops captured the beaches and the landings were safe.
At the Omaha beach, I think the American lost 2,500 soldiers. It was also mentioned in the Foreign of World War II video, which I also recommend to everyone who thinks that war is just in the rarest cases a good thing. Watch the video. see how many people died in this war. This should be, I mean, this should show us that we should try everything, every possible appeasement strategy, or everything we could theoretically do to prevent a war, to whatever costs, because war is worse than anything else.
Then they began their movements inland. They took the port of Cherbourg and the city of Caen. The Americans moved south to capture Brittany. Then, in a massive disaster for the Germans, British and Canadian troops from the north and Americans from the south trapped the German 7th Army in a near wipeout encircling movement. In August, Allied troops landed in the south of France to little resistance. On one beach, all they found was a Frenchman handing out champagne. Paris was liberated, and the Germans were pushed out of France as the Allies entered Belgium. In the Far East, the Allies started to push the Japanese out of Burma, as the Americans launched a two-pronged offensive in the Pacific. In the south, General MacArthur led the push to liberate the Philippines, while General Nimitz oversaw the brutal island-hopping campaign. American forces had to make hard-fought landing after hard-fought landing on fiercely defended small islands as they moved steadily towards the Japanese mainland. The Japanese believed that the greatest thing a person could do was to die in battle, and the most dishonorable...
Yeah, that's also something I heard, that the Japanese soldiers were, how was his name? I don't know, that they threw the airplanes into the ships, and they believed that I think that dying in a war was something which is much more preferred to do than being captured. I mean, it's not that unusual, I think, but I mean, for war and for radical ideology, but it's also, of course, terrible.
Act was to surrender. As a result, they fought ferociously to the very end. And the closer the...
something I have to mention at this moment also, the two soldiers from two different sides, whether now Ukraine and Russia, whether now Nazi Germany and Soviets, or wherever in the world takes any war, in whatever war. When two soldiers decide that they, why should we fight? Why should we fight? We should just drop our weapons and do something else. This kind of picture that two soldiers from two different sides are hugging in a kind of, why should we fucking fight each other? We should just have peace and don't kill each other. This thing is, I think, something the people at the top, the governments, the kings, whatever, emperors, are afraid of, because if the simple people just don't do the war they want, then war is over. There is no war anymore when soldiers are hugging. And there was this artist in Australia which made a picture from a Ukrainian and this Russian soldier hugging each other. The Ukrainian ambassador in Australia, of course, said it is Russian propaganda. And I don't want to dive too much into this, but it is just so weird that this it's absolutely weird, and I don't like this, and the picture was then removed, and so it's just so stupid, everything that but that's, I mean, people who to this degree try to defend any kind of war or violence, they are just absolutely terrible. And yeah, I think it is great, and the best thing a soldier can do is drop his weapon and hug his opponent. There's also a book I have read, Im Westen nichts Neues, Nothing New in the West. I don't know if the English title, but it took place in the First World War, I think, and in the Western front between France and Germany, the war where no one really got any new land, and they moved just a bit around in this I don't know in English, but this was in this war. The book was about this war, and when they really in the one moment the protagonist found a nearly dying or already dead French soldier, and he took a look in his diary or something like this. I'm not exactly sure in what way, but he or maybe he just saw a picture in a portemonnaie from his wife, from the other soldiers who was dead wife. And in this moment, when soldier and soldier from two different sides really find out that the other one is also just a normal human being, and it's not like they are kind of bloodthirsty scum. Or I mean, often in Twitter or on Twitter I saw it only, but the people were always calling the Russian orcs. I mean, it starts with such racism that the foundation is laid for future wars. This is so terrible that and then when you say something against such tweets or something like this, you are of course immediately a Putin troll. Immediately, instantly. Anyway, it's just so stupid. And anyway, but I didn't want to dive too much into this. We will continue with the video. And the greatest thing, in my opinion, a soldier in any war in the world, in any time in the history could do, is drop his weapon, hack his opponent, and try to make peace, and don't fight each other, because the reasons behind the war are mostly just greed and some other pervert reasons, and the people who suffer the most in the war are always the simple people, the normal people on the street, like you and me, who would watch this video. I make this video, you watch this video, but normal people who have no bad intentions, those suffer the most. And people at the top, people, they will always go. I mean, they will not get any kind of negative consequence out of the war. They will just move somewhere else. They are rich enough. They will leave the country if the country is completely bombed or destroyed, and start a new life somewhere else. They have the money. They have the power. So the people who suffer the most are the normal people. Anyway, let's continue with the video.
The Americans got to the mainland, the more ferocious the resistance became. In February 1945, the Americans captured the island of Iwo Jima, and an intense firebombing campaign of Japan's wooden cities began. The Allies suffered some setbacks trying to liberate the Netherlands, but they were making progress and were now threatening the industrial heartland of Germany. Hitler's health, both mentally and physically, was rapidly deteriorating. Things were looking bad, and he was desperate. He said, "We need to turn this thing around, and I have just the trick. Remember a few years back when we blitzkrieg through the Ardennes and trapped the Allied forces in Belgium? Well, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Again." He gathered his forces and tried to pound them through the Ardennes. He used up the remainder of Germany's strength and resources, and he managed to create quite a nice bulge. He also trapped some American forces in the Belgian town of Bastogne. The Germans sent the trapped Americans a message saying surrender or be annihilated. When it was read out to the commanding officer, he said, "They want to surrender? No, sir, they want us to surrender." Nuts! And that's what they sent off as their official reply. General Patton's Third Army then managed to break the siege from the southwest, and the Germans were pushed back. Hitler's last-ditch attempt had failed, and what followed was a total collapse of the German forces. The Allies pushed into Germany from both sides. The Soviet Union took Warsaw and kept pushing to Berlin. In his bunker, Hitler realized all hope was lost. Berlin fell, and with it, Hitler's dreams of a great German empire. Two of the Axis nations had been knocked out. One to go. The Americans began their assault on Okinawa, the last island before they would reach the Japanese mainland. The desperate Japanese fought hard, launching kamikaze attacks on the US ships. The citizens of
Kamikaze attacks was the name of this attacks where the Japanese just took their plane and crashed it into the ship. I forgot earlier the name, but now I know it again.
Okinawa suffered through the terrible fighting, but in 2 months, the island was captured. The Allies now had to make a choice. Either continue the devastating struggle up the Japanese mainland, or they could try to coerce the Japanese into surrendering now. In July, the first successful atomic bomb test took place in New Mexico.
A terrible moment for human history, this successful test. The energy is already dangerous enough, but the atomic bomb is terribly. And as I think also Einstein helped creating it, but he was absolutely strongly against. I think he even wrote letters, I think, to the president not to use this atomic bomb. Also, I'm not exactly sure, but I think this happened. Let's continue.
And the destructive weapon was ready for use. America and the UK were also seeing the Soviet Union not so much liberating as occupying its captured territories, and so they wanted to put on a show of force. On August 6th, the A-bomb fell on Hiroshima. Then, on the 9th, Nagasaki.
Since then, have the Americans ever said sorry to this? Ever excused themselves or asked for forgiveness for doing this to Japan? I'm not sure. I don't know. But yeah, I would not be surprised if this would not be the case.
The cities were reduced to rubble, and for the people living there, it was a terrible fate. But for the Allies, it achieved their main aim. In September, the Emperor announced Japan's surrender, saying the war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. After 6 years, war was finally over. The Allies occupied...
I mean, it's great that the war was over, but also without dropping the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I think it would have happened in the same way, just maybe a bit later.
Japan for 8 years. The Emperor was allowed to keep his position, but General MacArthur made sure this picture was printed in the Japanese press to display to the Japanese people that their Emperor was not the divine, powerful being they had believed. Germany was divided between America, the UK, France, and the Soviet Union. In 1949, the Allied sectors were united into West Germany. The Second World War had been more...
50 to 80 million people which died. In the video from the other guy about the fall of World War II, it were 17 million people, but I mean, he also said that they were not, it's not sure about the exact numbers, so it could also be more than 80, I don't know. It's just absolutely terrible. And this should never happen again.
Terrible and destructive than the first. In its aftermath, two major superpowers with two very different ideologies had come out victorious, and the tension between the two of them would create a new kind of war. A very, very cold one. Wow, Churchill, that looks just like me. And your app is doing really well. And this quesadilla you made is to die for. How'd you learn to do all this stuff? I used the link in the description to get 2 months of Skillshare for just 99 cents. Wow, tell me more. Okay. Skillshare is an online learning community with more than 19,000 classes in design, business, technology, and more. Premium membership gives you unlimited access to high-quality classes taught by genuine experts working in their field, so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. If you want to learn how to create games, you can check out the courses on using Unity or creating vector art. There are courses for software development, music production, arts and crafts, or if you want to learn how to animate like I do, you can find loads of courses for beginning animation. And Skillshare won't take a heavy toll on your wallet compared to other learning platforms, with an annual subscription being under $10 a month. If you'd like to give it a try first, then I've got a deal just for Oversimplified viewers. The first 1,000 people to use this link, which can also be found in the description, will get their first 2 months of Skillshare for just 99 cents. That's right, just 1 cent short of $1. So be sure to sign up using the link in the description, improve your skills, and learn something new today. This video was made...
Okay, I watched the video before already. I mean, it wanted to start in the same video again, so... Yeah, do this, go to Skillshare, but I think the links are long gone, so just maybe if you have the money and if you want to support Oversimplified, which I recommend, or... I mean, I don't do it myself, but I would do it if I would have a bit more money. Go to his channel and maybe become a member of his Patreon or so. I don't know if he has something like this, but support him, subscribe for his channel. He's very awesome. Even if I sometimes maybe disagree with some things he say, but in general he makes awesome videos. And yeah, the video is already longer than 1 hour, the longest video I've ever made. I hope it will be alright and you will like the video, and subscribe for my channel too if you want to support me. This was quite a long thing to do. And if you agree also with me or disagree, write into the comment, as I said also earlier. We can talk there in a normal human way with each other. And yeah, so like the video, subscribe, and yeah, see you next time.